This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today is Chad Coulter, founder and CEO of Biscuit Belly. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. Good to have you here. So you have a background in pharmacy, but transition into the restaurant industry with your wife, Lauren, prior to launching Biscuit Belly, which is the franchise concept we're going to discuss today. You guys owned and operated a concept called Louis Vino, a successful wine bar and small plates concept in Louisville, Kentucky. Tell us about your journey from pharmacy to restaurateur, and then subsequently how you got into Biscuit Belly and became a franchise system.
Yeah, so I graduated from University of Georgia in 2008. So Georgia boy at heart, and got to give it go Dogs. Playoffs are coming up soon, so
yeah. Good luck this upcoming weekend.
Yeah. So always had the entrepreneurial passion to do something. That's actually why I got into pharmacy, is to open my own.
Okay.
However, with CVS and Walgreens literally on every corner, side by side or adjacent, or across the street, and reimbursement rates from insurance companies continuing to decline, we felt like it just wasn't the right fit anymore. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, obviously, wound up in the restaurant game. But our first business venture ever was a painting and drinking spot called Uptown Art. So
okay.
I'm sure you and your listeners know they were a pretty hot concept 10 or so years ago. Mm-hmm. Very low barrier to entry from a cost standpoint. We were right out of school, had some student loan debt, but it still made sense. So we opened that in 2011 while we both had our full-time job.
Was that also in Louisville?
It was. We ended up opening two, and we sold it probably 3 years after we opened it. We just, we're ready to get out. And, but one of the learnings from that concept was the fact that we were selling a lot of wine. And it wasn't the good stuff, right? Like it was the really cheap, $2 chuck type of stuff that you get. Right. But we were selling a lot of it, and we noticed that the landscape in Kentucky, specifically Louisville, was all beer and bourbon. And so we're like, all right, there's kind of this area that we could maybe do something in as our next business venture. And so we found a spot, ended up buying the building, and due to some laws at the time, we actually had to have a food component to it. So we
was that to balance out the revenue? Like you had to have a certain amount of food revenue against the alcohol revenue?
This was actually a law that actually went out of favor, was stopped when basically the month that we opened, and we had to be 750 feet away from another bar. So we had bars all around us. So we couldn't have just a bar concept. So we had to have food, to basically get to this 50% or more of food revenue. So we found an executive chef who was ready to do his own thing. And we found a sommelier in training, and we put a staff together. We often kid that the very first time that my wife and I worked in a restaurant was the night we opened our own. And so, we did all the construction, the design, the logo, the menu, all pretty much in-house. And opened in 2014. We had 60 or 70 wines by the glass to start off with. It was a small, about 70 seat, if that, restaurant.
And was that a second generation restaurant or bar, or did you guys have to kind of gut it and do everything from scratch?
Well, it was. The only thing we were really able to keep were basically the walls and the hood. Everything else was pretty far gone. So it was basically a complete gut job. They didn't even have a grease trap because they were grandfathered in before grease traps were required, which led to issues down the line.
Right.
But yeah, we opened Luvino. We ended up growing that into 5 locations in 3 states. So we had 2 in the Indianapolis market, 1 in downtown Cincinnati, and then 2 in Louisville. So that we did bring on 1 partner to help kind of fuel that growth. They ended up coming along the journey of Biscuit Belly as well. And yeah, in 2018, after always having this kind of, I don't know, fascination with the biscuit sandwich by growing up in Georgia and getting them literally everywhere, all different kinds, felt like, well, let's try to do this biscuit concept that we've been thinking about for a few years. And yeah, 2018, we started working on the branding and the menu with the chef that we had at Luvino. And yeah, we found a spot, opened the first one in 2019.
So what was kind of the transition? Like, when did you exit out of Luvino to kind of focus full time on Biscuit Belly?
Yeah, so from when we opened the art studio to, again, 2019, my wife and I slowly got out of our day jobs. She was working at Humana Insurance Company that's based here in Louisville. And I went part-time and then all the way out of my job in academia. And then she went part-time and then fully out of her job as well. So, we transitioned, kind of very slowly from 2011 to 20, probably 16 or 17 is when we were both starting to get fully out. But, we sold Luvino in 2020, the bad part of 2020, not the good part. And that was specifically to focus on this moving forward.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool that you guys have that backstory of like doing the independent thing and then kind of scaling, a business, because a lot of people that are looking to get in have W-2s and they're in the corporate grind and they're like, how can I do something that's different? And you guys have kind of put together a blueprint. So we'll get into that. So tell us a little bit about the concept that you're developing now, which is Biscuit Belly. What is it?
Yeah, so we are a fast casual breakfast brunch restaurant concept. We've got a slew of cocktails, espresso drinks. The food revolves around a large gourmet biscuit sandwich, and we use the biscuit pretty much any way that we can. So, for example, instead of French toast with normal brioche or other kind of Texas toast or whatever people are using, we use the biscuit. And we're just doing like fun things like that, a little out of the ordinary. Our goal is to be unlike any other breakfast restaurant out there, at least on a large scale. So you go to your traditional, we won't name names here, but you go to your traditional large format full service restaurants, and it's 20 different kinds of omelets and toast and bacon and pancakes and waffles, like the same thing pretty much over and over. So we wanted to be different. And I think also the fast casual nature of our brand is very different than the full service. It's a much quicker experience. So in and out much quicker. Unlike some other fast casual breakfast restaurants, which there aren't many, once you sit down with your number, we are very much a full service restaurant. So we're running the food, running the drinks, bussing the tables, where some of those, your traditional fast casuals, you have to do that yourself. Yeah. I think another thing that makes us fairly unique is the fact that we are largely scratch based. So we're making biscuits from scratch every day. Obviously, we feel like we have to because it's in our name. And a lot of our other items are made from scratch as well. So it just makes for a fresher, better experience. I think it's cool because a lot of these brands, they kind of go away from scratch in that it's a bad thing, right? Because it requires, a little bit more talent. It requires following recipes, and in franchising, obviously you want things to be replicatable. But the fact that you guys have this, that's a main differentiator for you guys, is you have
kind of unique menu items that are not easy to make.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of training and a lot of retraining and a lot of retraining and videos and going in there and making sure that people are doing it right. But we like to showcase it because we have this new, what we call a biscuit window. So in the queue line, when you're waiting to order at the register, we actually have a window now that is directly in front of the biscuit maker. So you can actually see them making the biscuits or other things from scratch. And so we often try to figure out, how do we tell this scratch made story? Because we often don't get credit for it. And we don't want to put scratch made before everything on the menu either, right? That just gets annoying. But if people are able to see it, then that resonates with them versus maybe just being on a page. So we're really excited about that and have received a lot of positive, compliments. And we feel like those stores now don't get that. They're like getting credit for it now, where we didn't necessarily.
I get it. That's like a really cool talking point. People that experience your shop, they tell their friends. They're like, I got to see the biscuit made, and that matters to people. It's something that kids are going to think is cool, and customers are going to appreciate that. So, like you said, you get credit for it, which is what you should get if you're putting in the work, right? So let's talk about the chronology. You mentioned that you opened was the first shop in 2018, or was that later?
Say it again now.
The first Biscuit Belly. When did it open?
2019. Yeah,
2019,
June.
okay.
2019.
So
we opened 2 that year.
You opened 2 that year. Wow. Okay, that's ambitious. So now, fast forward to 2024, how many locations do you have open and operating? How many units are in development? Because you started there in Louisville and you've expanded out of state. So what's it look like today?
Yeah, so we're in 6 different states right now. We're about to open our 14th location overall. So we have 3 corporate units. We've got 6 franchise units. So it's 3 groups that have 2 each. And we've got 4 joint venture where we've raised money. We've raised money for the units and on behalf of investors, and we run them almost like a corporate store. So it's kind of a hybrid between a franchise and a corporate store.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So what are kind of the visions for growth? I'm imagining you want to stay in the southern, eastern Sunbelt states geographically. Maybe not. What are your thoughts on 2025 and beyond in terms of recruiting, new capable franchise owners to help you kind of expand the brand?
Yeah, 2025, we'll have several new openings as well through the joint venture model that we've put together. And this is the first year that we're really putting big dollars to our franchise development marketing. So over the last couple of years, we've really spent the time to try to refine the model to ensure that it works on a scalable way, as well as outside of our own geographical area to see if it travels essentially.
Right.
We wanted to make sure it travels well. It can be trained with branded seasoned operators in the restaurant industry before we go pedal to the metal in what we like to call selling paper. We did not want to be we didn't want to sell paper, right? We wanted to sell a brand, make sure we have it buttoned up, and build the team, get the concept and everything that is as good as we can possibly make it before we go out and really sell it. Because we're being really picky as far as who we bring into the system. We're not trying to sell paper and just do these huge, 25, 50, 100 unit deals, because those are just silly. And we want to make sure we're doing it the right way.
Yeah, makes sense. So you talked a little bit about what makes the consumer experience unique in a Biscuit Belly. Let's kind of switch gears and kind of tether on to what you were talking about with the franchise system. What makes Biscuit Belly unique as a franchise offering?
Yeah, I think several things. Probably the biggest thing that comes to mind, well, there's several things, but one that probably resonates most with our franchisees are the operating hours. Now, that's not necessarily unique to us in the breakfast world, but we're open between, we either open at 7 or 7:30, depending on the market. We close at 2 or 3, depending on the day. So you can't find many other restaurant concepts that allow that work-life balance that we can provide. I think us being scratch made is a differentiator.
Yep.
We combine 3 of the fastest growing segments in the industry. So that's fried chicken, breakfast brunch, and being a fast casual restaurant. So we're kind of putting all those things in one, because the majority of our dishes have fried chicken on them. And we know that has exploded here in the last few years. So I think that's a differentiator. Again, the scratch made. We have a small footprint relatively compared to other breakfast restaurants that are typically full service. So you look at the First Watches or IHOPs or whatever, and they're really big footprints.
Yeah, they're like 4,000 to 6,000 feet. Like, what kind of space can you guys squeeze into?
Yeah, so our smallest, I think, is at 2,600.
Okay. But
kind of the perfect footprint for us would be a 2,800 square foot end cap with patio.
Okay.
That's perfect for us. We get about 80, 85 seats or so, plus whatever the patio can provide. And so you look from a build out cost, you look from a staffing standpoint. So smaller footprint, you're tighter, you can be more efficient, and it's just less to get into versus
not to mention your occupancy cost, right? I mean, because you're paying per square foot, so you get a break on that relative to your peers that are in the full service, larger format spaces.
Yeah. And I think the labor model too, we often talk about this, where when you have a full service breakfast model, you have to have, let's say you've got 200 seats, because again, large footprint, you've got to have 15-ish or more servers out on the floor at your busiest time. So that means you have to have 15 to 20 people that are menu experts in everything. Yeah. I've got to have one that is really that expert, and that's the cashier that answers all the questions. I can take pretty much anyone off the street. I can teach them how to bus tables, run food, make drinks. Some of the other things like expo would take some more training, as well as that cashier person. But again, it's an easier model to train, because you only have to have a couple of experts in those key positions, and then everyone else is really just support.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, because anyone that works in a full service restaurant, my son is 18 and he works in a full service restaurant, and it's really hard to keep up with the menu. And you multiply that by, like you said, 14, 15 people and multiple shifts, and not only the pure quantity of labor, but making sure they're all like tippy top on their stuff as it relates to the menu and all the questions they get from customers. I can see in a fast casual environment, you solve that problem, at the touch point at the cashier. So that's pretty cool. So what's the timeline to open a restaurant? You've done several of these. I know it depends on availability of space, but like if you find, like a vanilla shell, are we talking like 6 to 9 months to get in a kind of a new Biscuit Belly? I mean, depending on, the variables and permits and whatnot.
Yeah. So let's say you have your permits, you have your space, lease, and permits ready to go. It's about call it a 90 to 110 day build out. And then we have your training, where we are sending 5, 6 or so people to your first 2 stores. We offer the training where we train your staff. After that, once you have a certified training center, it's basically on you.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's about that long, but as you know, permits and finding sites and waiting for buildings to get built, like we are waiting on 2 buildings to start construction now that we hope will allow us to open in 2025. But we're, weather and everything else, we're at the mercy of that. So anyway, that can be very aggravating, just as things, push back, and vacancy rates are at the lowest they've ever been in retail, with just everyone stopped doing construction in 2020, and interest rates.
Hard to keep up with growth, right?
Yeah, and so you're fighting with more people. You're fighting with nationals that have great credit and landlords like that.
Yep.
So yeah, it's tough. It's greater competition, which are driving prices up on the occupancy cost side.
Well, it's kind of good that you have your process buttoned up once you have the lease and the permits and everything, because that's when you can kind of win, is like getting the store built right quickly, because it is going to take more time on the front side to identify that right site, negotiate that lease, get the permits. But you know, the control you have is limited there. But then, you know, once you have the project, you can kind of, you know, escort the franchise owners through that construction project. And, you know, that's half the battle. And the second half is obviously training and operating. But, you know, the construction project it's a handful. So like having the experience you guys bring to the table, I know that probably puts a lot of franchise owners at ease, because, especially if they're first timers. So tell us a little bit about the staffing model. You mentioned before in fast casual, you cut out a lot of that floor labor. What does the staff look like for, you know, a new owner that's opening their first Biscuit Belly location?
Yeah, so depending on if they're the operator or if they may be overseeing a larger territory where they're building several units, they'll typically have a general manager or operating partner that may actually buy into the larger entity of the franchisee. Mm-hmm. So they'll have the owner operator or general manager. They'll typically have some sort of kitchen lead as well as shift lead in the front and back. So they'll have two kind of leaders, and one in each, the front and back. And then you've got typically a total of about 20 hourly employees, depending on how busy the store is. Sometimes it's as few as 16, 17, sometimes maybe 25 or so. But you've got, and that's evenly split between your kitchen and your front of house and support staff. So, yeah, I mean, it's a relatively small staff. I mean, we're only open, I think, 52, 53 hours a week, give or take. So a lot of our kitchen staff especially have second jobs that they may go to for nighttime, you know, working in a restaurant. So we're a good daytime gig for them. We get a lot of single moms, working moms that work for us, and that works out great just from a lifestyle standpoint as well. But yeah, you're typically looking at 18 to 25-ish people or so, evenly split between the back and the front. And in the back, you've got your line cooks. You've typically got a couple of prep people as well, making biscuits or any of our other scratch-made items. And in the front, you've typically got your general manager and kind of their right-hand man or woman, and cashier support, someone working what we call the bartista, which is a barista bartender combo, and they're doing all the drinks and all that. So
yeah, very cool. Well, thanks for that. So let's kind of switch gears to the franchise support side. You and your wife kind of co-founded the concept. Who else have you brought in? Like, what team have you assembled to help a new owner kind of manage the phase of opening the restaurant, and then get them trained and, you know, operationally support them through that critical first couple of months when they kind of have their grand opening?
Yeah, great question. So we've got myself and my wife on the leadership team, as well as a couple of very experienced people in the training and operation side, both of which have a long tenure at Texas Roadhouse. I think your listeners probably know that there's very few restaurant groups that do as good or better than Roadhouse. So we're really lucky to have them on our team.
That's a family favorite in my house. They just catered my son's football banquet, and that's all I heard about was Texas Roadhouse catered our banquet.
Yeah. So, and we're also lucky to have them in our backyard. They're based here in Louisville. And so there's we have a very talent-rich city between Papa John's, Yum Brands, and Texas Roadhouse. So, yeah, they handle operations and training. We have two people in-house on our marketing team, and we have a culinary director as well. So between food, training, marketing, my business partner and I handle a lot of the real estate We also have a master broker who has a whole data science team on their team that go through and analyze each site that we're interested in and kind of score it on a ranking system to make sure it's a good site and a city that we want to be in.
Got it. Very cool. So you just touched on marketing. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like when the new business opens, what do we do to kind of, you leverage like local marketing support so that, people know you're coming and it's a success out of the gate to kind of attract a lot of customers and make a big splash once you guys kind of come to town?
Yeah, we have a whole playbook, and I'm not going to pretend to know every page in it, but I'll give you the highlights. We will typically start marketing on Facebook, Instagram, the Meta platform, usually about a month prior, just to start getting the word out, get people excited. We have graphics on the windows, so and signage as well. So as people drive by, they'll know what's coming in that space. We will engage with a PR firm for 2 or 3 months to not only do our big grand opening release, but also continue to get us involved within that community for a few months after we open. We will engage with influencers in the area, and it's up to the franchisee if they want to do this. We strongly recommend it, but we will have a biscuit making class for influencers, typically the week that we are doing our training on site. And so, they're taking all kinds of content for us and posting it, so we're getting thousands and thousands of views there.
Yeah, I can imagine with your products, it's very like Instagram and TikTok friendly.
Oh yeah, we say that the camera eats first in our restaurant. The camera comes out, it snaps a picture, gets posted. So we get a lot of great free marketing from that. But yeah, I mean, it's a combination of paid advertising, PR, influencer marketing, and more experiential stuff. And then we'll typically partner with a nonprofit and do like a give back on the soft opening days. And then we'll do pretty big giveaways as well on the actual grand opening day. So do like free Biscuit Belly for the first 50 people for a year, which is like a $25 credit per month.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can see that being a big deal.
And scratch offs that day and mug giveaways, T-shirts. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, we spend a lot of time and dollars on making sure that people know that we're there.
Yeah, it sounds like everyone in town is going to know you guys have arrived, which is really cool. So what are you touched on this earlier, but what are you looking for ideally in a franchise owner? Like, I understand you're not looking for those like private equity companies out of the gate to like commit to 25 or 50 units just to look good in a press release. But do you allow candidates to come in and lock down a market and commit to a 3 or a 5 store development agreement? And then kind of the second question there would be, the only way to do that is to have some type of semi-absentee ownership once you stabilize that first unit and grow your team. So, what do you guys look for in an owner? And, do you allow, that kind of multi-unit, franchise ownership model?
Yeah, I mean, that is honestly who we prefer. Those that are looking to go into a territory that can support 3 to 5.
Okay.
I mean, we're not shying away from the single unit operators as long as they are within our territory of distribution currently, which is a pretty good part of the Southeast. But, if somebody wants to do one in Dallas, like that makes no sense, or one in Arizona or wherever. It needs to be, a cluster of a few stores. But again, like case by case basis, maybe a single unit, but really looking for people that have either restaurant experience as an operator or have some sort of business experience or exposure. Like, we don't really want to be in the business of teaching people how to run a business for the very first time. Restaurants are not typically, even though we kind of did it. Restaurants are typically not where you want to cut your teeth in the entrepreneurial world, unless you've been around it and know what to expect and know all the things that can happen. It's just a different animal. And so if someone comes along, they've grown a brand before, maybe it's not a restaurant brand, but they know how to build a team, and they know about service and quality and all those simple but very important things that you have to worry about in the restaurant, then like, yeah, we'll have a conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't want to be really teaching people how to run a business, because we just aren't set up for that, honestly. Like, we're really good at what we do, and that's showing someone how to run a Biscuit Belly. But I feel like they need to have some sort of background of just, whether that's accounting, real estate selection, like just some basics of business ownership, kind of brick and mortar business ownership, to get to the restaurant.
I think that criteria is going to serve you well, because it allows you, as you mentioned, to focus on your strengths and not trying to there are going to be training wheels, so to speak, but you don't want to have to teach someone for the first time how to run a business or run a restaurant. That's going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
So how much does it cost to get in? I know there's a wide range of cost because we don't know the footprint. We don't know the condition of the space, but what's our range in item 7 to kind of launch the first Biscuit Belly, a single location?
Yeah. So not knowing exactly the numbers off the top of my head, but you're looking at the mid to high 700s to a little over 1.1 million. And that's all in. We have to obviously disclose a lot of expenses, like that, and that includes 3 months of operating capital. That includes 3 months rent. That includes all your build out, signage, FF&E, franchise fee, everything else. So, typically your franchisees are getting a fair amount from the landlord too, to help offset that for their build out. So, that's all dependent, on their own negotiation.
Yeah. And then also with, funding, if they go the SBA route or some other type of funding, they can probably put in 20% with some, post-loan liquidity. So for $200,000-300K or less, you're probably in business.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So anything about the item 19, about the financial performance you can share with us?
Yeah, so we do disclose some information, unlike a lot of other brands, but so we kind of go to the middle of the road. So we share sales, which can be seen on the FDD, and we also share labor and cost of goods. And we feel like those who really know restaurants, who again are the ones we're trying to bring in, will really like where we are from a labor and cost of goods standpoint. We have also done a tremendous job. This is actually where a lot of where I spend my time is just on the contract negotiation, supply chain side, to ensure we're getting the best prices for not only us, but our franchisees. And we own and operate actually the larger part of the system right now. And there are a lot of franchisors that don't do that. So they don't know, when price of eggs go up, like they have been, or butter,
they don't
or whatever.
feel it the way you feel it.
Yeah, like you want someone in there that feels the pain and is like, hey, I want to do something now about it, not just say, oh, it'll go down eventually, right? So I'd say that one of our advantages too, I put in that category, that we are not 100% franchise system. Like we are actually owning, operating, and growing our own stores. So we're putting our money where our mouth is.
You got some skin in the game.
Yeah, and so we've made great progress. Our goal, again, not sharing anything I don't think I'm not supposed to, but our goal next year, 2025, is to get our cost of goods, which for us is all the things you can actually consume, not paper, plastic, or to-go bags or anything like that. The actual consumable product, getting it below 25% is where our goal is. We're pretty darn close to that in Q4 right now. So in a very high inflationary environment, I feel like we're doing a really good job in selling the dream, not only to our franchisees and prospective franchisees, but also our vendors and suppliers. Because ultimately, franchisees that are profitable are going to continue to grow, and those that aren't are not. So we want happy franchisees that are profitable and wanting to continue to grow.
Yeah, and I like that you're putting franchisee profitability at the forefront of the concept, especially in food, because it's notorious for having low margins, and what you're describing in terms of your prime costs are really attractive. And I know candidates can go check out the FDD and kind of get into the specifics, but yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I'm looking forward to checking your concept out myself. Anything else you want to add to the mix before we wrap up today, Chad?
I don't think so. Again, would love any conversations for of your listeners who are, business savvy with experience, specifically in restaurants, who are looking to maybe add a fun and exciting and pretty low hour commitment from a concept in this industry. So I'd love to have the opportunity to discuss and grow.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think a lot of folks like the idea of running a business that can achieve this kind of volume and still be home for dinner with their family. So I do think that kind of work-life balance is pretty cool. So if anyone listening would like to connect with Chad to learn more about becoming a Biscuit Belly franchise owner, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on X at QBFranchiseQB. I'll get you connected with Chad and his team. Chad, thank you so much for taking the time to get in the huddle and discuss Biscuit Belly with us today.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.